Hello, welcome to another Seeds of Flourishing, as I'm now going to be calling it. So I've opted not to make a rod for my back and try and do this daily. It was a valiant attempt on my part, I feel. So what I'm going to do now is the Seeds of Flourishing videos are going to go out on any day where I'm not doing a Magic the Gathering video. So that's why I'm not calling it the Daily Seeds of Flourishing anymore. It's just going to be Seeds of Flourishing. I'd missed a few days here and there anyway, so it was only inevitable. And how I'm going to do it in terms of the thumbnails, which hopefully everybody's got used to now. So all the blue background thumbnails are going to be Magic the Gathering videos. Anything in orange is daily seeds. Daily again is going to be Seeds of Flourishing, and I'm going to basically channel anything that's not Magic the Gathering probably into that category, because most of the things that that aren't Magic the Gathering that I talk about tend to revolve around flourishing anyway. I mean, you could argue that all of my videos should be orange, but I do want to differentiate between specifically the flourishing I get through Magic the Gathering and the flourishing I get through everything else. So I'm going to do a top 5 Madonna albums. So I've got Madonna's album discography up here. Also, you can see I've got some tabs ready to go. And you can see Madonna here looking a bit piratey, although a bit late to the party. Anybody that's familiar with piratiness in music will probably know that, the purveyors of original piratiness will be the band Running Wild. So yeah, you're late to the party, Madonna. Running Wild is where it's at, although I'm sure there's subsequently now arguments about proto-pirate metal maybe, and other bands that might be acknowledged as being pre-pirate, so to speak. But for me, this is the album where it all started. So yeah, nice try, Madonna, but you're a bit late with that piratey look. So 5 albums I've picked. I'll go through them in a while, and I'm going to include the links above to this. One of the albums, normally when I would do a top 5, I'd pick only studio albums. One of the albums, so I've allowed myself a little bit of wiggle room. Technically it's a compilation album, but there are some new tracks on there, and it was so different from other compilation albums in the way it was just prepared that I often think of it as I don't think it in the same way as I would a compilation album. So my first pick, and these are just in chronological order, they're not in order of which ones I find more popular than others, although probably top of the list might be this album, certainly up there. So Like a Virgin, produced by Nile Rodgers, Steve Bray and Madonna. It's got tons of hits on it. 6, they're Like a Virgin, Material Girl, Angel, Into the Groove, Dress You Up, Love Don't Live Here Anymore. What I'm doing with this episode is I'm sort of tying it back to my own sort of personal history, and around about when I discovered the album, what was going on, what I sort of associate this with, and apart from the music, because a lot of the tracks on here, just because of the nature of the music, bring a smile to my face, but just it reminds me of what I was doing at that time. So around the time I was hearing all of the tracks off here, because so many of them were singles, it was all over the radio, and you can see there's a relatively speaking sort of tight release schedule to some degree there from 84 into 85. This came out in 84, so there was one track that had come out before the album was released. This was also covered by Lords of the New Church a little bit later. So at that time, I would have been heavy into hanging out in pubs and going clubbing. So I just thought I'd bring up a map of around where I lived when I when I was talking about I think the Owls episode, I was talking about, living around Ashdown Forest. So I grew up in Forest Row. So a lot of the pubs I used to hang out were in Forest Row, particularly the Swan in Forest Row. But also, me and mates would go clubbing in East Grinstead. There was this strange little club in the middle of nowhere, nightclub. It's closed now. It's at the same place as what they call a furniture store called Trading Boundaries. And it's right in the middle of nowhere near, in the UK, this place called the Bluebell Railway. And so, those were my sort of main places I'd go to, would be either pubs in Forest Row or go up to some, club in East Grinstead or pub in East Grinstead, or drive out to here. Also at that point I was going to a lot of gigs, and the gigs I'd mainly be going to would be down in Brighton. But the stuff I was listening to at that point I would have been listening to a lot of going to gigs like Killing Joke, who else? The Damned, The Cure, those sort of bands. So more indie rock bands, but I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Madonna. So next up we have Like a Prayer. This came out in 1989. Again, a number of hits off of this, 6 hits off of this, produced by Madonna, Patrick Leonard, is that Leonard? Or Leonard, however you say that. Stephen Bray, Prince was involved with this album. I suspect a lot of these albums have multiple personnel on them producing the music. And whenever I listen to this, beyond just, again, lots of cool tunes on here, reminds me of walking around Ashdown Forest. I did a lot of walking to this in 1989. And I've mentioned my love of walking in previous videos. So I'm sure I brought this up before. So, I lived around this area, and so I'd often walk. There's several golf courses around here, which because they're on Ashdown Forest, you can walk across. They're not private. They're not. I think there's some technicality, like they only own the greens or something like that. I might be wrong about that, but anyway, there's basically tracks all across the golf course, which you can walk down without being hit by a golf ball. And then, of course, we've got the main part of Ashdown Forest here as well. So plenty of opportunities to walk around there. Moving forward, this is maybe the odd one out. So strictly speaking, this isn't a studio album, it's a compilation album. However, it's a bit strange in that it has 3 new songs on it. You'll See, One More Chance, and a cover of Marvin Gaye's I Want You. Also, they've included the singles I'll Remember and This Used to Be My Playground, because these weren't on any albums. So it's a mixture of hits. I tend to find this album's more slower tracks on it generally. You can see you've got some collaborations here with Massive Attack. And one of the tracks is from a, motion picture. But whenever I listen to this, it always reminds me of working at Radio Rentals. So I worked in the accounts office at Radio Rentals for a period of time. Best place I've ever worked. We had great fun. The radio was on all day in the background. At that point, I did a couple of jobs there. I was a contract chaser, and then I worked on a helpline. And I remember when tracks like You'll See would come on, and we'd sing along and change the lyrics to various things. So that's one of my picks of 5. As I've said, not strictly speaking a studio album, but nonetheless I'm going to include it because obviously I can just make the rules up here as I go along. So if you're curious, I'll include a link to this because a lot of people don't, or of an age where they probably don't realise that when I grew up, I was born in the 60s, a lot of my childhood memories in the 70s, and then, went started work at 17. So in the 80s I was working. But people rented TVs back then. So radio rentals, was all they were based around. And not surprisingly, the rental business model wasn't viable when you got into the 90s. So from the UK perspective, the stuff shut down. A lot of the property was acquired, I think, by a Japanese investment bank. However, I didn't realise this, but there was radio rental stores still going. I was at radio rentals in the 90s, in the period when, so they were part of Thorn EMI, and Thorn EMI demerged in 96. So I was there during the demerger. I mean, it didn't affect us directly, as far as I can remember, but we then became just under the Thorn banner. We weren't part of Thorn EMI. It was a very good time for anybody, any members of staff, particularly that have bought stock, which was a thing people could do, because they got 2 for 1 in the demerger. And when the company sort of finished up in the UK and they were bought out by a Japanese investment bank, they had to buy all the shares. And a lot of people that worked at the firm since they were, at school leaving age and were close to retirement by then, because the firm had been going since the 1930s. There's one of the showrooms in Brighton was the original showroom. I'm assuming it's not still there. And they, the ones that were coming up for retirement, that were probably going to leave the firm, retire anyway, if the firm hadn't have wrapped up in the UK effectively, obviously got to cash in all their shares when it was bought out, because the investment company were a private company. They weren't listed on the stock market, so they had to buy all the shares. Now, it then got very muddy because the firm sort of did carry on, but in a different guise. But the key thing was it went from being a company that was listed on the stock exchange in the UK to one that wasn't. So, yeah. And I was curious. I wanted to look and see what the office... So this is... I don't know when this was taken. This is from Google Street View. Looks a bit of a sorry state. This was a really nice office. So this is clearly fenced off now. Interesting bit of Magic the Gathering trivia, actually. So this monstrosity here, and I don't know when this was taken, this backed onto what then was Martell's. I don't know if Martell's is still here. It's because it's, I think, nearly 3 years now. Probably 3 nearly, since I've visited the UK, sadly. But I remember when I used to walk through here, there was a back entrance to Martell's, and that's where I saw my very first pack starter deck of Magic cards. And I kick myself today that I didn't buy it. I don't know what edition it was. This would have been, 95, 96, so could have been 4th edition, could have been, I don't know if it would have been 5th edition, but probably 4th edition. It couldn't have been Alpha Beta, I don't think. And it was annoying because I did know about Magic a little bit before that. It had been mentioned in a documentary I watched, which was about the history of computing. And one of the person being interviewed there talks about falling in love with a card game called Magic the Gathering. So, yeah. Then we move on to Ray of Light. So at this point, 98, I was still working for a consultancy. I'd left Radio Rentals and was driving all around the country. I didn't go self-employed and start my own IT troubleshooting and training business until about, November 98. And so, yeah, I have strong memories of this playing on my car CD. I had quite a nice car by then. Was it a Fiat Brava? And I'd be driving all around the UK. I think the furthest out client we had was in Brecon Beacons. And at that point, I was based down in Eastbourne. That's where our office was. When I was at the company there, it was just me and my boss. It was a startup. There was a startup of a larger firm that had been going. I say a larger firm. I think there were 3 other people in this firm at another office, and that firm had been running for a number of years. It was basically a value-added reseller that modified accounting software, which had 4th generation language programming in it. And I remember driving all round parts of the UK to get to clients. I mean, we did quite a bit of dial-in then, but back then I can't even remember what the name of the software was, but of course you would be using all dial-in modems at that point. So often, and particularly when we were doing, big rollouts of the software and the mods, we'd obviously had to go on site for like a week or however long to sort of be involved with that. So I was living out of hotels rooms at that point, a bit of a road dog. And then after that, I went and worked for myself, and the area I covered was a lot smaller when I was working for myself, mainly Surrey, Sussex and Kent, because I was able to sort of pick my area of the area in which I worked. And then my final pick is Confessions on a Dance Floor from 2005. So I picked this up a little bit later after it was released, probably about a year before I moved to Canada. So, probably sometime around 2007, 2008. And I remember at that point, this would be when I was working for myself, I used to hang out in Tunbridge Wells a lot on a Sunday morning. So I was living in Forest Row and then I moved to Nutley. So it's quite nice driving over to Nutley early on a Saturday morning, and I'd go shopping in Tunbridge Wells. And the shops I used to visit, sadly, are no longer operating. I mean, we're talking about a period when a lot of independent record stores shut down, and so then they were, as I was going over there, these places were sort of shutting down. But my main sort of 2 places I used to hang around was sort of around this area, which is the central shopping area, and then I'd like wander down after there to the bottom of the town to a place called the Pantiles, down near the bottom, down here, and that's how I used to spend my Saturday mornings, and then ultimately Sunday mornings. And I can remember, let's just go down Street View. So this is what I suppose this looks like now. I don't know how old this photo is, unfortunately. Sometimes it does say in the corner, 2020. There we go. So 2 years old, so I'm sure it's changed since then. So this would have been during COVID. I'm pretty sure that one of the record shops was here, and then the other one, this probably makes no sense to a lot of people, but I do enjoy just reminiscing about stuff. The other one was somewhere here, a little small one-man band, and this is one I used to like to go into because I'd always have long chats with the owner. He was very knowledgeable about music generally, particularly things that I was into, like sort of punk and new wave and other stuff. But he had a lot of pop in there, so I went in there, and that's where I bought Confessions on a Dance Floor. But if you're ever visiting the UK and find yourself in the south of England, Tunbridge Wells is a real nice place to visit, or was. I'm assuming it still is. And I've spent many a wonderful weekend wandering around here, either on my own or with friends. So hopefully you found that interesting. I tried to sort of link in top 5 albums with, times in my times in my life when I was listening to it, and hopefully through that you can see why I felt that it was definitely helping with my flourishing. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next video.